For God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God.
Hundreds of world leaders and climate change experts are descending on Copenhagen to try to come up with a new pact to slow global warming. But reaching that deal has now been complicated by what's being called ClimateGate, a string of hacked private emails between global climate change scientists in the U.S. and Europe, which have cast doubts on the very science this summit is based on. The emails seem to show that some of the world's top experts decided to exclude or manipulate some research that didn't help prove global warming exists. 1998 was the hottest year since record-keeping began, but the temperature went down the next year, and it's only spiked a couple of times since. An email from 1999 shows scientists worked hard to demonstrate an upward trend. They talk of using a trick to hide the decline in global temperatures.
The problem that we've got is that there's these adjustments that go on in the climate data. And these adjustments are used to basically fit all the data together into one data set to get a global average. And it's harder than you might think. You know, we've got differences in the way stations have been moved and located and so forth and so on. And so they're trying to adjust for all of this and to make everything, you know, one standard record. The problem is that in doing so, they're creating artifacts. Here, for example, is Darwin, Australia. And as you can see in the green, that was the original record, and then it goes to the blue. Well, they made some adjustments where they changed the green. They chopped off part of the green between 1890 and 1910 because they decided the data wasn't valid for some reason. And then the other data, after 1910 up to about 1940, they lowered. And so you get this new trend. It looked like it's going way up, but that's not reality. That is simply an adjustment, an after-the-fact adjustment. That is not a real measure of the climate.
It worked like this. When temperature readings gathered from studying tree rings showed what looked like a decline in temperatures from the 1980s to the present, the scientists added in measurements taken later by more modern instruments, which gave them the answer they wanted.
If one asks about, is the temperature increasing or decreasing, it's always doing one or the other. I have no concern about that. By asking people to worry about whether it's going up or down, you're immediately establishing dishonesty. The Earth is always changing. Climate change is nothing you have to prove. It always is happening. It always has happened. So to make that into something alarming seems to me a little bit weird. Sea level is a hard thing to measure, actually. At any given place, traditionally, sea level was measured by what are called tide gauges, a stick in the water, basically. And two things change what a tide gauge shows: the land moving up and down, and the sea moving up and down. In most places, it's the land that is the biggest effect. So you don't have a good measure of sea level rise. On the other hand, for the last 30 years or so, we've had satellite measurements that are actually measuring sea level. It's very hard to relate these two measurements to each other. They are measuring different things. The general feeling is there is no evidence that it's different now than it has been for the last few thousand years. The claim that we've suddenly seen a big change in that, given we've changed the instrumentation and given the error bars cover the difference, is not entirely fair.
This is now a clear global problem. The absolute consensus is that human action is leading to an increase in average temperatures. Absolute consensus.
And I'm absolutely stunned that someone who is inspired by Richard Feynman, a fantastic scientist who believes in empirical evidence, is quoting a consensus.
Can I just say, I brought the graph, right? I mean, can I
after the fact adjustment. That is not a real measure of the climate.
First of all, that the data has been corrupted, and we know that the 1930s
What do you
were
mean by
warmer than today.
corrupted? Yeah, corrupted. What do you mean corrupted?
Been manipulated and
By who?
By NASA. By the
NASA?
yes.
Feed, and wouldn't you know, we have a astronaut go by us in the background, obviously trying to give it a more realistic, spacey, station busy effect. The only problem is the camera that was supposed to mask this harness out, or the video feed, is
busted. He's wearing a harness. You've seen their harnesses. Well, I have seen their harnesses like bulging under their clothes and pinching up on their shirts and stuff. But here the technology isn't doing its job and it's not masking the harness. Also, there's something weird on his knee here.
pretty amazing. But that's not all that goes wrong here.
This guy isn't really holding this hat. It's not really floating in the air. They're both on harnesses dangling here. They are wearing contact lenses that through which they can see these objects. I'm just, going over it one more time. He just explained all this, but I want to make sure everybody understands. They're seeing this, and through the technology, we are also able to see it on their film. They can even do this live. I'm not sure how that all connects in, but this video is proving to you once and for all that they are frauds. Watch the guy in the green shirt here. He is supposed to be clutching something out of the air and putting it down over here. Watch.
The guy on the left in the green shirt, he thinks he sees an object in 3D space that's being broadcast to him. So he grabs it and he puts it off to the side. He's looking straight ahead because he's looking at an object rotating in front of him. But the video channel is down that is supposed to show the viewers what we're supposed to see. And so we don't actually get to see the object that he is seeing. And I would just sum this up as a very terrible, bad, horrible day for NASA.
It is a very, very horrible day for NASA.
Is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the We only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to. And we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen, so in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going.
Corrupted? What do you mean corrupted?
Been manipulated
By who?
By NASA. By the
NASA?
yes. As far as I'm concerned, politics should be based on empirical evidence. All policy should be based on empirical evidence. I've heard consensus, which is not science. I've heard appeals to authority, which is not science. I've heard various illusions. Hang on. I've heard. Hang on.
I don't believe in a God, right? However, I don't like the antagonism that occurs or is produced by this question. I mean, what you can say if you're a cosmologist, what you should say is, so we know that the universe was very hot and dense 13.8 billion years ago. We don't know how it got hot and dense. We don't even know, actually, if the universe had a beginning in time. Don't know. So that, to me, is where the science starts for me with, I don't know.
Science doesn't rule out the existence of a creator.
No, but in the sense that I just said, that I think we're overstepping the mark. I do not believe there's any evidence for a creator.
The first book of Moses, called Genesis, chapter 1. In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools.
They claim that in order for a trail to hold its shape, there must be additional chemicals or additives involved. Hence the term chemtrails. While it is true that contrails likely contain particles from inside the aircraft's engines, people believe there must be something more. Much more. Some think that these mystery chemicals are being used to do one of several things. One theory is that chemtrails are an effort to reduce global warming. By spreading stratospheric sulfur aerosols, solar radiation can be reflected away, thereby reducing the temperature of the Earth. Another theory is that these trails are a form of cloud seeding. By spreading silver iodide, potassium iodide, or other chemicals into a cloud, it can actually be induced to rain or snow.
Guy who made billions out of creating super clunky corporate software. What you didn't realize is that Bill Gates doesn't think of himself that way. Bill Gates doesn't think of himself as some guy who got super rich making bad software. Bill Gates thinks of himself as God, in control of the solar system. And that's why Bill Gates is now backing something called sun-dimming technology that would reflect sunlight out of the Earth's atmosphere, causing global cooling. Ooh, that's not fraught with risks. You thought gain-of-function research on pathogens was dangerous. Try that. But that doesn't stop Harvard University. Its scientists are testing that technology by spewing calcium carbonate dust into the atmosphere.
Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial. It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth.
Now, just to restate, Bill Gates is not God. Bill Gates is some kind of weird, socially awkward rich guy who lives in Seattle. He doesn't own the planet, but he's now changing the planet single-handedly. This is not just over his yard in Seattle. This is over your yard and our oceans and the whole planet. Now, according to Forbes, Frank Kutch, who's the project's top investigator, quote, does not know what the results might bring. Oh, just experiment with the globe and find out what happens. It's cool, though. He's a billionaire. Michael.
People believe there must be something more. Much more. Some think that these mystery chemicals are being used to do one of several things. One theory is that chemtrails are an effort to reduce global warming. By spreading stratospheric sulfur aerosols, solar radiation can be reflected away, thereby reducing the temperature of the Earth.
It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth.
Another theory is that these trails are a form of cloud seeding. By spreading silver iodide, potassium iodide, or other chemicals into a cloud, it can actually be induced to rain or snow.
Perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world is the condensation trail lie. What we're seeing in our skies is not condensation. It's sprayed particulate dispersions with very few exceptions.
They shouldn't be there. Jet engines burn clean. So if there's anything coming out of them, it's an additive.
They're absolutely not contrails. Contrails do not linger, dissipate, and go into cloud coverage, period, in the report.
And I kept saying to people, what is this? Because now the sky is no longer blue, it's starting to turn gray. And what I found was kind of like it was not socially acceptable. We're all going to pretend this is not really happening.
Rain in Dubai today, just so I know. I have to drive back from Abu Dhabi to Dubai.
No.
It's not raining. It's a sunny day. The UAE government invested more than $20 million in research to start a process called cloud seeding. The UAE performs around 1,000 hours of cloud seeding a year, and it's all controlled by this building in the National Center of Meteorology in Abu Dhabi, where they track the whole process. We met with a cloud seeding expert to explain how the seeding process works.
We wait the forecast. When we have a good chance for a cloud, we send the aircraft to that location. It go under the cloud. In the first stage of the cloud, there is good updraft at that time, start to release all the salt, and with the good updraft, of course, it will go inside the cloud. The droplets will become bigger and start to rain.
The center manufactures a salt substance that helps enhance rainfall. They put them in what they call flares.
Climate change is one of the biggest problems that we face today. Millions could suffer hunger, diseases, coastal flooding as a result of climate change. We may be beyond the point of no return. Scientists believe that we have no choice but to consider geoengineering. This is large-scale manipulation of the Earth, such as spraying sulfate aerosols into the ozone layer in order to increase the reflectivity of the planet. But geoengineering is very, very risky. We have never attempted these technologies on such a large scale. So we could end up destroying the entire ozone layer. I want to consider a class of solutions that have never been considered before. Human engineering. It involves the biomedical modification of human beings. I'll give 4 examples.
We need to realize that humans are now hackable animals. You can hack them.
Belief in free will. I don't think that the question of, is very interesting or very central. It has been central in Western civilization because of some kind of basically theological mistake made thousands of years ago. But it's a misunderstanding of the human condition. Humans are now hackable animals. The whole idea that humans have, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election
or whether in the supermarket this is my free will, that's over.
If you take a genetic editing, just as an example, it's you who are changed. And of course, this has a big impact on your identity.
We need to realize that humans are now hackable animals. You can hack them. We have all this still myth of free will, that everything we choose is of our own free will. And this is a myth that served us well for a couple of centuries, but now it's becoming dangerous.
I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news.
Wait, that's not true?
And now if you give the tools to start changing or overcoming biology.
So I'll give two examples. So one is that people eat too much meat, right? And if they were to cut down on their consumption of meat, then they would, it would actually really help the planet. But people are not willing to give up meat. Yeah, you know, some people will be willing to, but other people, they may be willing to, but they have a weakness of will. They say, wow, this steak is just too juicy. I can't do it. I'm one of those, by the way. So, you know, but so here's the thought, right? So it turns out that we know a lot about, we have these intolerance to, for example, I have milk intolerance, and some people are intolerant to crayfish. So possibly we can use human engineering to make it the case that we're intolerant to certain kinds of meat, to certain kinds of bovine proteins. And there's actually analogs of this in life. There's this thing called the Lone Star tick, where if it bites you, you'll become allergic to meat.
Well, one day, you're able to enjoy steak, hamburgers, perhaps a sausage on the grill, and the next day, these foods could cause a severe allergic reaction.
Yeah, it's called alpha-gal syndrome, and until now, it was linked to bites from a tick found in the southeast. But new research is linking the reaction to patients and ticks found in New England.
And I was fully covered in these hives, head to toe.
We first introduced you to Rob Attaway a few years ago. The Georgia man says he broke out into hives and suffered unbearable itching for years before finally getting answers from an allergist.
Found the problem, stop eating red meat now. And I stopped eating red meat, and within 3 days of that, everything started to clear up.
Rob tested positive for alpha-gal syndrome, a delayed allergic reaction to red meat. It's caused by a bite from the Lone Star tick, typically found in the South. But new research is tying the red meat allergy to 2 more types of ticks found closer to home. CDC researchers linked alpha-gal to a 45-year-old Maine woman bitten by a black-legged tick in York County. Researchers also linked alpha-gal to a different tick bite in a woman in Washington state.
We know the range of Lone Star ticks, and yet these 2 cases seem to be something a bit beyond that.
The climate crisis.
Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system.
We have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. It is an opportunity we have never had before and may never have again. So we must use all the levers we have at our disposal, knowing that each and every one of us has a vital role to play.
The Great Reset is a welcome recognition that this human tragedy must be a wake-up call. It is imperative that we reimagine, rebuild, redesign, reinvigorate, and rebalance our world. Rebalancing investment, harnessing science and technology, and advancing the transition to net zero emissions, all elements of the Great Reset, are fundamental to building the future we need.
This Great Reset is as serious and as dangerous a threat to our prosperity, to your prosperity and your freedom, as we have faced in decades, with these powerful bodies, including the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and even Prince Charles boasting that within a few short years, yes, their words, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Remember, this is not me saying this, this is them. They are even running ads for the Great Reset. handful of countries will dominate. I wonder which ones they might be.
The World Economic Forum has confirmed they're investigating former chairman Klaus Schwab after his seemingly abrupt resignation on Monday.
An anonymous whistleblower sent a letter to the organization and accused Schwab of misusing forum funds and resources. The Wall Street Journal first reported the news.
The letter also criticized the forum's workplace culture and governance. The Journal writes it included allegations that Klaus Schwab asked junior employees to withdraw thousands of dollars from ATMs on his behalf and used forum funds to pay for private in-room massages at hotels. It's always massages at hotels. This alleges that his wife, Hilda, a former forum employee, scheduled token forum-funded meetings in order to justify luxury holiday travel at the organization's expense.
By my colleague, Børge Brende. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Well, thank you very much, Klaus, and hello to everyone in beautiful Davos.
I had a chance to talk to my favorite author, Václav Smil, about his new book, How to Feed the World. In your book, Japan and India are held up as examples where the meat consumption is, I guess, more rational.
But you see, not only in India, but in France now, there are whole groups of people who already are eating less than 30 kilograms of meat per year.
So eating 30 kilograms per year would be one meal with meat every other day.
The best example is something which totally astonished me, the Spanish story. Because under Franco, they were poorer. Meat was like 35 kilograms per capita.
35 kilograms, that's about 77 pounds of meat a year.
And then, after they joined EU, they became the biggest meat eaters, surpassing the Germans and the Dutch. And now they come down maybe like to 85 or 90, but it's immensely, right? But what they have done at the same time, the Spanish stopped drinking wine. Wine is down, red meat is down. As population ages and the taste change, much less red meat and much less wine.